Apex is a very difficult game, and honestly, there are some things I know now that I would have killed to know when I first started. 3 massive secrets I wish I knew when I started playing Apex Legends. But if you want to improve faster and get more in-depth guides, make sure to head over to the GameLeap website, where I personally have made literally hundreds of guides to help you improve faster. Guides covering fundamentals, advanced movement techniques, advanced legend tutorials, gameplay breakdowns, legend abilities, legend strategies, and so much more. We spend a lot of time and do our best to give a full analytical breakdown that will actually help you in whatever goal it is you have in the game. So if you actually want to learn faster and become insane at Apex, I highly recommend you join the GameLeap fam to get instant access to all of these in-depth guides by checking out the link in the description below. Now, the very first thing I wish I had known from the very beginning is just how important holstering is. It seems like such a simple and insignificant mechanic, but that couldn't be further from the truth. Apex is a game that is heavily reliant on movement, and even the simple things like how quickly you reposition can make or break your game. So having that extra 13% movement speed increase from holstering can really come in handy. And I know many of you are worried that holstering will cause you to not have your weapon out ready in a fight, and to that I'd say go look at Fade. That dude is constantly holstering, even in the middle of a direct engagement. Just like with anything in Apex, it's all about how you are executing it and timing. Yes, holstering and standing there in front of an enemy of course isn't going to do you any favors, but if you are using it to get out of a line of sight, that's a different story. Like seriously, if you are trying to get around a corner to get out of an enemy's line of fire, that 13% movement speed increase could be just enough to save you sweet buns. Not to mention it has an effect on your climb speed, slides, and more. And speaking of which, my favorite thing about holstering is how it affects your slides. When I learned about this, it literally changed everything, and I saw an immediate improvement in my performance. So if you didn't know already, there's a mechanic called bullet slow in the game, and essentially anytime you get hit by a bullet, you are slowed for about 0.25 seconds with an internal cooldown of around 3 seconds, meaning every 3 seconds, there's a possibility you get slowed, making you a much easier target to track, as well as making it much more difficult to slide since you have to be at a certain velocity, which can be a big problem if you are trying to reposition to get out of the line of sight, or if you're trying to reload with a slide jump, a wall bounce, or basically any advanced movement tech. However, if you holster your weapon before you go for a slide, it significantly reduces the amount of acceleration or velocity required to actually perform a slide. Normally, it will take you 3 steps to get a full slide off when you have your weapon out, but when you have your guns holstered, it only takes 1 full step. Again, this may not sound like it makes much of a difference, but I promise you the effect is day and night. I highly recommend you always holster before going into a slide just to make it a habit. And yes, even when you are in combat, if that slide is what's going to save your life, then pulling it off should be your priority. I will say, it is still possible that bullet slow can give you a dead slide if you get unlucky enough with the timing, but holstering significantly reduces the chances of this actually happening. And going back to our point earlier, if you are truly afraid of not having your weapon ready due to holsters, a fantastic way around that is to unholster your gun immediately before you actually slide. So you'd holster, then step forward, then unholster into a slide. This gives you the acceleration and ability to slide as if you were holstered the entire time, but allows you to pull out your weapon much sooner than normal. You can see this in action by watching Fade, and I highly recommend you take some time to watch him and pay close attention to how he is holstering and sliding and when he is doing it. It will blow your mind on how much he actually does, and I'm sure it will help to give you a better idea on when to actually holster. Now, the next thing I wish I knew when I first started was recoil smoothing. Recoil in Apex can feel a little crazy at first, but in reality, it's actually not that bad. But in general, aiming in Apex can be difficult just due to the color palette, the strange hitboxes and movement, so recoil added with these factors can be more than just a simple annoyance. However, there's a little technique called recoil smoothing that can significantly reduce the amount of bounce caused by the guns firing and makes them far easier to control. And it is really easy to do. All you have to do is strafe while you're aiming, and this added movement to your physical aiming causes an effect where the recoil is significantly reduced. It's really important to note though that when it comes to recoil smoothing, the faster you are moving, the more effective it becomes, and the opposite is true as well, where the slower you move, the less effective it will be. That means when you start using slower weapon classes like LMGs, it's just not going to be nearly as prominent. It is really strong when using SMGs, not as strong with ARs, and close to non-existent with LMGs due to ADS strafe speeds changing depending on the different weapon types. Another important thing to note is that it suffers from diminishing returns the further out the range becomes, meaning you can't abuse it to beam crazy long ranges with a car SMG, for example. That will require a combination of good aim, recoil control, and recoil smoothing to achieve. Nonetheless, this just emphasizes how important it is to keep moving while you're in gunfights, not only to make yourself harder to hit, but also to help with recoil control. Now, the final thing I wish I knew when I first started playing is how critical it is to be more effective with your reloads. This is another one of those things where it seems like it doesn't matter that much, or you may not even realize you're making a mistake in regards to it, but for the longest time, I had no idea how bad my reloads were and how they were costing me so many fights. In particular for me, I had a really bad habit of not completing the full reload before switching weapons or holstering. So when I would later go to pull out my gun, I would need to finish the reload, then just get absolutely murked. In general, whenever you need to reload, that is a very dangerous time for you. In fact, it is one of the moments in the game where you are the most vulnerable because you basically can do nothing during the entire animation, and a lot of the times, you have to reload when you are directly in front of the enemy, meaning you're easy to hit. And yes, you can just swap to the other gun, but it's only a matter of seconds before you have no choice but to reload because, well, both will be empty. And if the enemy has clear sight of you during this moment, you better pray they missed all of their shots or that you have some insane movement. Now, there are a few ways to manipulate reloads to your advantage. For example, you could reload slightly early if you notice the enemy is missing shots, and this will allow you to have a full clip sooner, and hopefully you can beam them while they have to reload. Not to mention, reloading your magazine early initiates a tactical reload, which is a roughly 20 to 30% faster reload than one of an empty gun. This is something you will see pro players like Ross do pretty often, and it is more than enough for you to have that extra control over a fight and be less vulnerable in engagements. However, those situations are generally when you're in the open or when you're in a 1v1 in the open. Most of the time, it's best if you just pay close attention and make sure you are completely finishing your reloads, but also that you try to put yourself in a position where you are safe to actually perform said reload. Usually the safest place is behind cover. Sometimes it can be hard to remember, but this is just another reason why staying close to cover as much as possible is so important. It allows you to minimize exposure during moments of vulnerability at the drop of a dime. And that's actually one more thing I really wish, well, I already knew it when I started playing Apex, but I wish I had really put more emphasis on, and that's just my positioning and making sure that I have good cover. Just ensuring that I'm being smart with how I am placing myself and how I'm exposing my hitbox. It makes a massive difference on the outcomes of your games, and if you are not putting focus into that, that is the number one thing that you need to be doing when playing Apex Legends. In the end, there are a lot of things that can help when we first start playing Apex, but often it's the small things that go unnoticed. However, those are the very things that tend to hold us back if we don't catch on to it. So I urge you to take a look back at your own gameplay to see what you may be doing wrong, even if it's the smallest of a bad habit, because that always can add up to make for a bad time. I hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in the next one.